Good morning. Let's get started. We'll warm up with the bear for a minute, just because who can avoid doing the bear? Feel the rear crown of your head suspended. If you watched Beth on Tuesday, she did an hour on that feeling of the light and lively energy at the head top, which allows the head to feel light with the body hanging down from it. And feel your feet on the ground, especially on a summer day like this when I'm practicing barefoot. I can really feel the tripod in each foot. So go ahead and feel those bony parts on the bottom of your foot connected to the ground. As you shift and turn, they stay in contact with the ground, steady and even as you're turning. And really relax as much as you can. Feel the arms just swinging. It's as if they're really light. So a turn of the waist causes the arm to move. The motion starts in the waist and moves out to the hand. Not doing it with your arms, but letting them just follow the motion. And then, because of what we're going to work on today, pay special attention to the hips. Notice how one hip joint closes as the other opens, and then the other closes as the first opens. So notice how your two hip joints are moving out of phase with each other. As one closes, the other is opening. So this isn't one-sided. It's not get over to one side, do everything on this side. Get over to the other side, do everything on this side. The two of them are working together. One closing and one opening. So the turning is happening in both hip joints. It can help to put your hands right in the hip joints so that you can really feel them. And the hip joints, so you want to be as close to the moving part as you can. So the hands are quite close and personal. But you'll feel the thigh and the front of the pelvis coming towards each other, and while the other side is releasing and opening. So get that double-sided thing. The hand gestures that I'm making can help you visualize what's happening. And both hands are involved, just like both hip joints are involved. So that's the motivator. This is where the motion is coming from. Dantian, hip joints, base of spine, all of those working together. And then the arms are just swinging in response to this. Whole body relaxed and open. Really feeling the changes in the hip joints. The two hip joints doing different things. Another swing or two. Great. Let's do a first third to get ourselves going. We're trying a new layout in the room. We're sort of trying to figure out how to fit the space, but we'll see how we do. And just have this be easy. Just go ahead. Letting this be light and easy. Moving gently and gracefully through the form. Okay, so the move I want to work on today is cloud hands. And so let's do some cloud hands, and then I'll talk about the posture details, and then we'll get into how the motion actually moves through your body in cloud hands. Cloud hands is a great move. It's so simple, and we get to repeat it over and over. And there's, inside that simplicity, a lot going on. In order to find all of the things that are happening inside that simplicity, first you have to get the external posture details right. So we're going to start just doing cloud hands a number of times, and then we'll look at the posture details, and then we'll use that to show us what's going on inside. So taking it from flying diagonal, and go ahead, we'll just do it a couple times. Shift and turn, step, shift, hand switch, turn to the front. This is the final posture. Continue. Step, shift, hand switch, turn to the front. Final posture. Continue. And one more. Always end with your weight on the left side. Okay, so cloud hands. Cloud hands has us in a rare position where the feet are parallel. Our weight's going to be in one foot or the other foot, but the feet are parallel, the toes are in a line. So when you're doing this, watch for your stepping. Watch to see if you're stepping with the feet not with each other, angled in strange ways, or if you're actually managing to step side to side, feet parallel. This is hard. A lot of times I'll step with my foot not exactly toes in a line. So, give yourself a little space, but also really pay attention to that stepping. Let's do another couple. Flying diagonal, just so we can get started. Go ahead shift. First one, you pivot on the heel. Stop in the final posture here and check your feet. See if they're actually in a line side to side or not, if the toes are, and if they're parallel, and if they aren't, change it. Continue. Step. Shift. Turn to the front, final posture. Check the feet again. See if the toes are in a line side to side, and if the feet are both parallel, pointed to the front. Again, step. Shift. Come to the front. Take a look at your feet. Fix them if you need to. Continue. Step. Shift. Come to the front. Take a look at your feet. See if there are toes in a line, parallel. Fix it if you need to. One more. Stop. Check your feet. I stepped forward with my left foot this time. I'm off by about an inch. So go ahead and change the feet so they're even. Final posture. The final posture, your weight is completely in one leg or the other leg. Whichever leg your weight is in, that hand is high. It's here by the solar plexus, center of the chest. The other hand is low. The two hands are directly vertically over each other. This is hard to see in the camera. If I turn so that you can see, they're vertically aligned here, not one out in front of the other. So really make sure they're vertically aligned. This is rounded. Our teacher Jane used to say, like hugging a big barrel, like a beer barrel. I have to admit that I've never hugged a beer barrel, and honestly, I think Jane probably never hugged a big beer barrel either. But you want this rounded feeling in here, rounded inside, not an angular thing. Here, you may be able to see the angles that are happening. I want that feeling of rounded. Rounded doesn't mean bend the wrist, so I'm not trying to have my wrist have a bend in it. The wrist is still beautiful lady's hand, but you can have a feeling of roundness through the arms. The top hand is at the center of the chest. The bottom hand is in front of your dantian. The two hands are vertically aligned. Your weight is in one leg or the other, whichever leg your weight is in, that hand is on top. So I can just shift back and forth between them, changing the hands. Let's do it again. We'll stop at the final posture. And go ahead. Step. Shift. Turn. Final posture. All the weight is in your left leg. Left hand is high. Right hand is low. Two hands are vertically aligned, like hugging a big barrel. Keep turning. Step. Shift and turn. Final posture. Check it out. Two hands are vertically aligned, hugging a big barrel. Top hand center of chest, bottom hand dantian. Continue. Step and shift. Turn. Final posture. Top hand center of chest, bottom hand dantian, two hands vertically aligned, rounded like hugging a big barrel. Continue. Step and shift. Turn to the front. Final posture. You know, top hand, bottom hand, vertically aligned, rounded. One more. Final posture. Top hand center of chest, bottom hand dantian, two hands vertically aligned, arms rounded like hugging a big barrel. All the weight is in one leg. Great. Okay, so we got that. That's not what I'm interested in for today, but you have to have the final postures in order for this to work. So what I'm interested in is the shifting and the turning. So as we're doing this, I turn and shift. That brings my hand underneath it. It lets my foot step. Now this is the really critical side. When I shift to change the hands, notice how my waist stays in the corner. There's a real tendency doing this to already be turned back to the front. And see what this did to my hands? Now my two hands are not related to each other. I want to shift and turn. The two hands pass by each other. I like to think about it as if there's a pole, and my two fingers are on the pole, and they just go right past the pole as they do that. So as I do this, I'm still facing my hands here, so that I can turn to the front and bring it with me. If I do the other thing, and I turn away from the hands, my waist is already to the front, I'm just going to move my arms, and they're going to end up in some weird place. So shift, stay in the corner, turn to the front. Continue, ball of air in the corner, step, little step. Shift, as you shift, the hands switch, the fingers running along that pole, and I'm still in the corner. I haven't shifted back to the front, leaving this hand away. I shift, I'm still in the corner. So let's do that again, because you really need to have this, or else all of the other pieces won't flow correctly. Flying diagonal. Turn and shift. That brings the hands into a ball of air. Step. Now shift. Notice that your waist is facing the corner. As you shift, you stay in the corner. So you're still here, and look how the two fingers should be vertically aligned with each other. They went along the pole. Now turn to the front. Bottom hand turns so the palm faces the body. Final posture. You know what to do. Check your feet. Check the hands. Rounded, vertically aligned, all that stuff. Turn further. Ball of air in the corner. Step. Shift, let the two fingers slide along that pole, and stop here when you've gotten all your weight into the right, and make sure your waist is still facing to the left corner. Now turn to the front. Hands come with you. Turn, ball of air. Step, shift, hands sliding along the pole. Turn to the front. Again, turn, ball of air. Step, shift, hands switch, sliding along the pole. Make sure your fingers are still over each other here. The hands haven't separated. You haven't turned away from the bottom hand. Your waist is still facing to the left, so you can turn to the front. Final posture. Top hand center of chest, bottom hand on tien, two hands vertically aligned, rounded like hugging a big beer barrel. Turn. Ball of air. Step. Shift, fingers along that pole. You're still with your hands. You haven't turned away from the bottom hand. Turn to the front. Final posture. Weight is in the left. Top hand center of chest. Bottom hand on tien. Two hands vertically aligned. Great. Take a break. So that's the basics that we have to have in order for this to work. Now, the interesting stuff is what's happening in the weight shifting, the use of ground, and the use of the hips. So, and a first piece of this is to observe that the way the arms work. When I'm in the final posture, my hands are far away from me, so they're not in close. This is not a big barrel. They're far away from me. And as I turn, the hands come closer to me. So see here, I'm really just like a palm's width or something away from my chest here. Here, I'm quite a bit away. So as I turn, the hands come in. So do this with me. Just stand with your weight in one foot or the other. I guess I'm doing it with the left. So the left hand is high, right hand is low. And as you turn, this is like a coiling around your body that rotates the hands and brings them close to you. And then release it and let it come back to the front. And turn, you're like winding up a fishing reel. You're doing something, you're coiling the arms around you, so that draws them in close. And now do it leaving the arms out. Turn and just let the hands be out far away from you. And notice how all the dynamic coiling that you could have done before is gone in the arms. The arms are just kind of loose out here. So come back to it and turn and let that coiling happen. That brings the arms up. It's like a compressed spring so that you can release, step, shift, allow the arms to change. Turn back to the front. We're on the right leg. Right hand is high. Turn to the right. Let that rotate the two arms and coil the hands. Release back to the front. So this should feel like you're winding something up. As you wind, there's a tautness that happens due to the winding. Not because I'm tightening my hands, but because I'm just winding something around. And I can release it if I don't step. It just takes me back to the front. From the coiled place, then I release it. That makes me step, sets me in motion for the next one. So I want you to see this, arms big, far away from you, coiled, arms close to you. And look how as you do that, that rotates the hand too. So it's not that I come over here to the side and then remember, oh yeah, my hands are supposed to face each other. That's part of the coiling, is to get the hands to actually come with you. As you're coiling here, both of them are close to me. So let's do this again. Flying diagonal. Here, everything is big. Turn, and right away feel that the coiling is happening to bring your arms close to each other. Stop after you've stepped and take a look at your top right hand. It should be close to the chest, and the bottom left hand is close to the hip. So they're close to you. And now shift. As you shift, you move away from them because they're sliding along that pole, and I'm moving away from the pole. Turn to the front. Feel that the arms are big, far away from you here. And now turn. As you turn, each bit of turn rotates the hands, coils the arms, brings them in close. They're close to me. Step and release it. It starts them moving. You move away from them. So I'm far from the hands now. Turn to the front. It's big again. Lots of room. And turn to the right, coiling. Feel that rotate the arms. You'll feel this tautness through the arms like you've wound a spring. And now release that spring in order to step, shift. Waist is still in the corner. You're far from your hands. Turn to the front. Big. Turn. Coiling. Release. Step. Shift. Far from the hands. Turn to the front. Turn. Coiling. Step. Release. Shift. Far from the hands. Turn to the front. Turn, coiling. Step, release, shift. Far from the hands. Turn to the front. Turn, coiling. Step, release, shift. Far from the hands. Turn to the front. Great. So now, the next thing to look at is what's happening in the hips here. So the hips are doing their out of phase thing. So it's obvious when I've turned and I step, this hip is closed, this hip is open. As I come to the front, the hip that was open is closing, the hip that was closed is opening. As I keep turning, this hip here is even more closed, this hip is more open. I release and step, shift. Now when I'm going to turn, I'm going to close my right hip joint, I'm going to let the left open. I'm going to keep turning, the right closes more, the left opens more, and so forth. So that's the obvious thing with the two hips moving out of phase with each other. But there's actually a little bit of turn in there that you might not see. When I come here and I coil, look where my hands are. They're at my side. Here at the beginning, they're right directly in front of my center line. As I turn, they slide slightly. Here's where my center line is. It's over there. And my hands have come past it. They're over here by my side of my chest. So I don't just keep them right here in front of my center line. If you try that, you'll see that that doesn't have that same feeling of coiling that's going on it. The arms stay loose when you do that. So when I do this and I let them coil, they're over at my side. As I step, if I don't turn when the arms shift, see how here they're again at my side. My center line is here. It's pointed about at the middle of my forearm, and the hands are over at the side. So when I turn, the hands don't want to come with me unless I tighten them and bring them. So as I shift here, my waist is actually going to turn slightly further to the side where my now empty foot is. As I come to the next one and I step, see again, my hands are at my side. As I shift, my waist is going to turn slightly towards the hands. Now, I'm not trying to do a big turn, but I'm just letting this happen. And as this happens, the hip joint that was open when you stepped is going to open more. The hip joint that was closed, even as the weight comes out of it, is going to close more so that you can come back to the front. So I want you to, we're going to do this again, and I want you to really pay attention to that way that from the end of the move, as I shift, I open more to the side, then I come to the front. I turn coiled, I step. As I shift, and I'm going to open more to the side. That brings my hands back to my center line so that I can carry them to the front. I turn, they're at my side, they're not at my center. I step. As I shift, the hands switch along the pole, and I open so that I'm facing them so that I can bring them back to the front. So let's give that one a shot. Flying diagonal. Turn. step. Okay, now think. You're going to open slightly more to the right as you shift. So now your hands should be at your center line so you can bring them to the front. Turn. Notice that your hands are slightly to your side. Step. When you shift, let yourself open more to the left. Bring the hands back to the center line. And now turn to the front. Turn. Hands are slightly at your right side. Step. When you shift, open more to the right. So now the hands are with your center line. Turn to the front. Turn to the left. Hands are slightly to your left side. Step. When you shift, you're going to open more to the left. So the hands are back at your center line. Turn to the front. Turn to the side. Okay, now watch what happens. As you shift, your right hip joint is going to close more. Your left hip joint is going to open more. That's what makes you turn to the right a little bit more. Now close the left, open the right. Two hip joints moving out of phase with each other. Continue turning. Left is quite closed, right is quite open. Step, right is still open. As you shift, right hip joint opens, left hip joint closes. Turn to the front. Turn to the side. Step. As you shift, left hip joint opens, right hip joint closes. Turn to the front. Turn to the side. Left hip joint's quite closed, right hip joint's quite open. Step. As you shift, right opens more, left closes more. I'm turned slightly more to the left. To the front, to the side, hands at my side. Step, shift, hands switch, come to the front. Great. So now there's a whole bunch of other things going on in cloud hands. I don't think I'll get into all of them, but there's some things to watch about what's going on here. When we teach it to you, we'll teach it to you square. And so we'll take you here, we'll have you hold everything. Step, check that you're empty. Shift, hands switch, check that you're facing the corner. Turn to the front, check that you're empty. Shift, empty. Step, empty. Shift, empty. Turn to the front. Turn, step. See how my hands aren't changing while I do that. Shift, hands switch, turn to the front. So this is kind of blocky. Now, where we want to be getting in this is that the motions are all happening directed by the waist, the lower back, the hip joints, the dantian, and that it's all one. You're not doing a bunch of broken moves. So I'm not turn, step, shift, turn. I want that to all happen together. So when I coil here, as I release, the release goes through my whole body, and see how the hands start shifting as I'm coming through here. So when I get into my left leg, the hands have finished switching, just like when we do it broken up for square form. Step, check your weight, shift, okay. But I don't have all those breaks. I'm here coiled, and I release that, and it makes everything go, and I come into the front. Now I coil again. I release that, it makes everything go. I come into the front. I turn, I feel that coil, I release it, everything goes. I come to the front. So the thing about square form is we'll stop at particular checkpoints as you're going through those. And you want to make sure that you've got your alignment right, so that when you're stepping, you're not doing something weird. You actually stop and step and make sure that I'm still upright, my hands are still in place. You've got to go through all those. But it makes these kind of arbitrary sharp edges. I come along and I hit something and I change and I have a sharp edge. With round form, we want all of that to move and change smoothly as I go through this. So with round form, I have this feeling of coiled tautness, and I release it, and that sets everything in motion, and I follow it to the next final posture. Now I coil again. Taut, that's potential energy. It's like compressing a spring or winding something that when you let go, it unwinds. So I wind it, potential energy, I can let go, and that moves my foot, moves my hands, and gives me the impetus to come to the next final posture. I wind, the potential energy is inside here. I release it, the foot steps, the hands switch, my waist turns. So from this coil, the release takes me all the way to the next move, the next final posture. So let's try that again, feeling the release. Flying diagonal. And go ahead, coil, and at the end of the coil, your foot steps. And now release. Notice that your top hand starts moving right away and you take it to the final posture. Turn and coil. Release. Let that move your foot. Let that move the hands. Let that take you to the front. Turn and coil. Feel that coil. Feel that potential energy, the compressed spring, the twisted wire, that when you let go, it untwists, it moves, the spring expands. Again, coil. Release. Coming forward. Coil. Release, top hand starts to drop, foot steps, hands switch, no breaks, final posture. Turn and coil. Release, everything moves together. Takes you to the next final posture. Turn and coil. Release, everything moves together. Takes you to the next final posture. Notice if when you're stepping, if your hands are moving. If the hands aren't moving, that means you're holding them. So when you have this coil, and then you release, all of the parts go into motion. Not just the foot. Turn and coil. Release, all the parts go into motion. Notice if you hold the hands in the ball of air, that's going to be tension. Let it all go. One more. And then if we were going to continue, the release would take you forward. Okay, I want to look at one more. Well, I'm going to mention two things, maybe three things. One of them is the motions of the arms. So we're told that originally there wasn't the Tai Chi form. There were all the individual postures and the individual moves, some of which were complete systems. In another style of martial arts, you could take something like four corners or cloud hands, and those could be a complete kata. In Tai Chi Chuan, all of those are put together to form the form. And so what we're told is that originally there were these individual things, like grass sparrow's tail, four corners, and then they got strung together to make the form. And so some of these moves are complete systems in themselves. You know, you could do just grass sparrow's tail, and it's got all the pieces in it. So, you know, this could be your full Tai Chi practice. The problem is that most of us aren't good enough to actually get Tai Chi from just doing one of those pieces. So we need the long form to make us figure out how to move in correspondence with the Tai Chi principles through all of these complicated things. So cloud hands is one of those complete systems. And that means that there's potentially a lot of different things going on in cloud hands. There's various ways you can think about cloud hands. I can do cloud hands and actually express different techniques in it, different ways of relating to the space around me or relating to another person without the outside looking much different. So I'm just going to briefly say one of those. One of those is what happens with this arm. As the arm is coming up, I can think about the arm expanding up and out. That's basically ward off. So I let this come up and it's in a ward off here. So the motion in that is across the arm, perpendicular to the arm as it comes up. Or I can think about the arm drawing along the length of the arm. So I can think about the motion being this way along the arm. And the reason the arm comes up is because it's attached to my shoulder. So if I pull it this way, that'll rise the arm, as opposed to having the arm rise. So inside of cloud hands, and if you work with us in person and, you know, could keep doing this, we'll show you these different variations. But inside of cloud hands, you can actually have a fairly different approach to what you're doing in there. Same thing with the other hand. Is the other hand dropping here? Is this a pushing down on something? Or after I push down, is it a strike coming forward underneath here? So you can play around with that. I don't want to spend much time on that this morning. The thing that I want to talk about is the stepping. So as I'm coiling, if I coil correctly here, it will at the last minute, take a look at the heel on my empty foot, it will at the last minute pull that heel off the ground. So my foot doesn't just stay there. If you do this with me. Stand on, say, your right leg and turn to the right. And as you do that, let your left leg just completely hang so that it doesn't pull the heel up at all. And now look at what it takes in order to step it. That leg is slack, and so in order to step it, you're going to have to buoy the knee, let the foot move, and make a step happen. Now do this again. As you turn and as you're coiling the arms, allow the coil to run down through your empty leg too. That'll pull your heel off the ground slightly. I don't know if you can see that my heel's off the ground, but it is. Then I can release, and I release everything, including that leg, and that causes the foot to step. On the other side, when I'm turning, I'm on my left leg, and I turn to the left. Do this with me. Turn to the left and leave your right leg completely slack. The heel's on the ground. The tautness is not through the leg. Probably means the tautness isn't in your arms either. And when you step, you've got to buoy the knee, allow the foot to come up and step. Do this again. Turn, and let that leg be completely slack. And notice the stepping. Okay, this time let the coiling go through the right leg. Coil and feel how at the end of the coil, it will very slightly lift your heel. This means there's a tautness through that leg that you can release and the foot steps. So in one of them, it's a more controlled and careful step than the other. If I leave the foot slack, then what I do in order to step, my mechanics is I sink, I buoy the knee, the foot floats, it goes out and steps. And so I can take all day with that. I can be here. As I'm sinking, I can bring my cup of tea up to my mouth. The knee floats. As I take a sip, the knee floats more. As I put the cup down, the foot goes down onto the ground. So that step is it's not with force and effort, but it's very controlled. Buoy, foot steps, place it on the ground. There's another way of stepping. We recently did a hour or so on stepping. There's another way of stepping where you create a situation that when you release it, it causes the foot to step. That's what I'm interested in here. I turn, I've created this tautness through the leg, and then I release, and the foot just steps. That is not sipping a cup of tea. That one happens in that moment of release. And if you've ever compressed a spring and then let it go, the spring goes fast when it lets go. Unless you hold on to it, it doesn't release slowly. So you compress a spring, you let it go, it just goes. Or if you take a taut wire and you crank it up, when you let it go, it unspins. It doesn't unspin nicely while you have some cake and cookies. It unspins. So I want you to have that experience of that leg unspinning when we do that step. And then I'll turn it over to Beth, and we'll do some more work on all of this. So, flying diagonal, coil, feel it pull your rear heel off the ground, and release. Final posture. In the final posture, everything is slack and loose. Turn, the turning coils, it pulls your rear heel off the ground. Release, everything happens. Back to the front, slack, loose. Turn, coil, create that tautness, pull the rear heel off the ground. Step, releases. Coil, release, everything happens, and follow it through the next final posture. Slack, turn and coil, release. Follow it through to the next final posture. Turn and coil, pulling the heel off the ground. Release, footsteps, hand switch, waist turns. Slack, easy final posture. Turn and coil, heel off the ground, release. Takes you to the next one. Great. So that's a bunch of cloud hands. Like I said, this one's a complete system. So we could go on and on and on about this. And we can find just about everything that we want that's in Tai Chi Chuan. So here is ward off. This fingers can also be tsai, pluck. This hand dropping down is push or on. You've got potentially an elbow here or a shoulder there. So you've got just about all the core techniques in Tai Chi are inside this one system. Plus, it's got all of this stuff about how do you actually step, how do you move the legs, how do you align yourself to center line, how do you make all this go. I can't actually pick a favorite move, but Cloud Hands is definitely in the running. So, see you all again in a second.
Okay, I want to look at the issue of turning. Lee's gone through a whole bunch of good stuff, and one thing that can get in the way of getting that nice tautness and the spring and all that stuff he was talking about is if the turning is going through your shoulders and making the upper body twist from the lower body because there's a place you're trying to put your hands, but your core isn't going with it. So you really want these, as everything else, driven from the center. All movement comes from the dantian, and turn the waist. So remember your waist. Your waist is this place here. It's not the here. That sounds kind of obvious, but once we tell you to turn to the corner and it gets like that, now we got a problem. The tautness is not going to create the conditions that Lee was talking about. So let's just take a look at this feeling. So do this with me, and as you shift, I'm shifting to the left. Make all the turn happen from the center and see what happens to your hips. You can even let go of the arms as the move and just sitting on the left, turning left. Do your hips and shoulders follow along with it? Now, don't try to keep those together, and as you turn, reach for the place you want your hands to go. And notice how that twists you around. You should feel really compressed and closed up in your chest and pulled apart a little bit. And then if you take your hands down, your hips are one place and your shoulders are somewhere else. Really want to get this feeling that all the movement is being driven from the turning of the hips. You have more turn than you think you do. However tight your hips are, I guarantee you have more turn than you think you do. Do the bear with me for a moment and just make it nice and easy, and then I want you to stop at one of the corners. Now, what's happening with the emptying hip joint? If you release the knee, release the hip, and feel the tripod in that emptying foot, notice that you can turn a little more. Do the bear again. And we'll stop in the other direction. Just stop where you kind of run out of the ability to keep turning on the leg that's closing, the hip joint that's closing. And notice where your hips are. And then actually let go of this one. And notice that you can turn a little further. So however much turn you have, if you let go of the one that's emptying, you will have a little more turn. Think of it as, a set of gears. When you turn on this side, it doesn't mean that this side isn't doing anything. It's actually, as one side is turning, so is the other. So I don't know if this picture here is useful, but when you do the bear, feel that you're rotating on top of two balls, and there's this out of phase thing that's happening where they're both turning on not just the one that you're drawing yourself toward and leaving this one to go. Shake out your legs, and I want you to look again at what happens if you lose the tripod on the emptying leg. So now there's a little bit of a roll. It hasn't picked my foot up, but there's a little bit of a roll to the inside of this leg. And look at the lines on my pants, what they're doing, how the line is falling in a broken pattern. What I want to do is still feel the tripod and the bubbling well on the emptying foot, so that as I turn, now look at where the stripes are. They're hanging all the way through. So do the bear a little bit. You can make it have the arms of cloud hands if you want. But feel, or you can just put your hands by your hips to see where they're going. But feel the bottom of the foot that you're moving away from. You're moving away from this leg. That's part of what gives you the tautness. So that taut feeling that Lee was talking about and how it lifts up your heel, notice that if your leg falls in, you won't get that. What you have is a lot of tension through here, but nothing that finds its way back down to the foot. Now just feel that tripod and notice that as soon as I felt the tripod, it changed the relationship of the stripes on my pants, basically. Now I can feel down to the ground, and I can let that tautness take the heel up a tiny bit. So this, you may need to explore this a little bit, but I just wanted to give you a chance to feel the different ways that you can either have that tautness go through down to the foot or not. So let's do it a few more times and bring that awareness. From flying diagonal. And go. As you turn, it picks that heel off the ground, gets you going. Now, as you turn, keep feeling the bottom of that foot. That gives you that tautness. Let it go. Turning away from that leg is what gives the chance for the little spring action. And even as your foot is being peeled off the ground, you can still have an awareness of the tripod and the bubbling well, or not. So go ahead and do this once where the knee kind of rolls in, the foot rolls, and your tripod, you can pick your heel up, but you still have to haul the leg over there because that feeling of being spring-loaded hasn't happened. Do it on the other side too, where when the tautness goes out and there's a break in the knee, even if it brings your heel up off the ground, you still have to manipulate it to get it there. So do it again, and this time, feel that line right through to the foot. Let it go. Over here on the other side, feel that as you move away, that's what picks the leg up, and you just release it. And once more. And let it go. So these are all one thing. If you can turn the waist, that little extra bit that you need to release on this side to get the turn to go that way, that will also keep you where the tripod is still has a connection, and you're moving away from that leg. Once you only go this far and you can't turn anymore, you can't get that last little bit of tautness in, But if you let this go, it will come all the way down to the foot and make that change. So it's not a bunch of things. Also, if you do it from on top and it's not happening down here, that also won't give you that little spring-loaded quality that gives this move some oomph. Let's do it again. And begin. Feeling all the parts getting worked together from the center. Turning, 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 and then it lets go. Making sure that you keep letting the emptying one be part of what's happening. You're turning away from it. It's not going dead, and it's not just getting pulled with you, but it actually creates a little bit of a spring quality. And we'll stop on this one. Rest your legs. So it's a little tricky. You have to be letting go of it, but it doesn't just go limp and dead. The key is making sure that this is where the movement is coming from. Notice you can turn your hips and then put a little bit more. So it's not like, oh, well, I'm turning my hips, so I don't have to worry about my shoulders. They've got to be coming with me. You can have this idea that it's got to be just a little bit more, especially when we say, when you turn, your hands end up just to the side of the center line. If you put them there even a little bit, now I've filled myself with tension, and it's like I've broken the line through the spring action, and it won't happen. So really, truly, observe how when you turn and coil, they turn just away from your center line. You're not pulling them at all. And ideally, this turn happens, the elbow isn't going away. So beware of any kind of pull here is going to take that potential away. I think that's probably enough about this move. So let's do it. Yeah. So let's do this round, one more round of cloud hands, and then we'll do a first third to close. So now think about all the things. You've got your feet, you've got your hip joints, you've got the shoulders riding with you, and the arms are nice and connected to what's going on. And go. Moving with the hands. Feeling your feet. The head top is light and lively. You're suspended from there. Really helps all the coiling happen. letting the base of the spine drop so that you can rotate on top of your hip joints. And one more. And at the final postures, take a break. Chungmen Cheng tells us there's a moment that everything snaps into its final place. So make sure that your eyes don't just track the room without seeing that moment in the front, the fullness of the final posture. Let that, you don't stop there, but there's a place where it all comes together. Let's do a first third. So, cloud hands. It's got the whole art embedded in it. Thanks for joining us. See you again soon.